My name is Carmelita Leuenberger, and this is my honors project for mythology. The title of my presentation today is Phaethon's Flight, Ambition, Discovery, and Tragedy in New York. So just a little introduction. So this story is located in New York City. Some important characters we'll go over on the next slide. A little family background. Phaethon is raised by his single mother. And another little side note, in this modern day New York City, everyone in New York City, or the majority religion, is classical Greek mythology. So some important characters that are noted are, of course, Phaethon. He's just a regular teenager growing up. Didn't have a father, wasn't raised with one. He knows he has one, he just doesn't know him. And then another one that we'll learn more about is Helios. He is a very powerful man. He owns a business in New York City that basically controls and produces all the new technology around the world. Little introduction. Phaethon is a young man in New York City. He's driven by ambition and a desire for recognition. He's raised by his single mother, and he knows very little about his absent father. He never really asked his mother about questions about his father because he didn't want to make her feel like she was unappreciated or inadequate, as she was like already working a full-time job as a nurse and raising him all by herself. Despite his efforts to suppress thoughts of his father, Phaethon often wondered about where he was and who he was. So one afternoon after school, Phaethon, like most teenagers, was just rotten in bed, scrolling on TikTok, and then one of his videos was discussing a new car from this company called Heliotech that he had heard about, just wasn't very into because he doesn't drive, because he lives in New York City. But he became obsessed with this technology and the company, and he just watched all their videos, learning more and more about like the owner and the cars they build and all the technology they build. So Phaethon's mother comes home from her little 12-hour shift from the hospital and calls him to sit down at the table, and they're having pizza. He's just on his phone scrolling, listening to everything he can, and Phaethon's mother asks about what he's watching, like why he's so absorbed in whatever this is. And then he like turns his phone around and shows like Helios, the owner, talking, and she instantly like recognizes his voice, and she asks all these questions, and Phaethon is surprised because his mother is exhausted and she's never typically interested in what he has to say, let alone specifically something online about a random stranger. So Phaethon was like obviously curious about this, but just went on with his life. And then he ended up going to bed, and he was just confused, but it was whatever. And then he tossed and he turned all night, and then the next day Phaethon finally got the balls to ask his mother about why she was so interested in Helios. And then she blushes, and she's like shaken, and she doesn't really know what to say. So she says, "Come on, Phaethon, let's go sit on the couch. I have something to tell you." And obviously Phaethon's suspicious of what she has to say about him. So his mother confirms his suspicions about Helios being his father. And then Phaethon is obviously shocked, but he's also super excited because he has a father, and he's alive, and he's very successful. So was like kind of like a dream to him. Still upset that he didn't have one to begin with. Still has a lot of questions. His mother didn't feel like it was her place to tell him these kind of things. So she told him that he could go ask Helios himself. So Phaethon got on the subway to go to New York City to go to Heliotech, the building that they have, hoping that Helios would be there. He was outside the huge skyscraper, and he decided it was time to go in and meet him. And then so Phaethon went in there to go meet his father, but the secretary was like, "Do you have a meeting?" And he was like, "No." And then she was like, "Then you can't go up and see him." And he was like, no, like I need to go up and see him. And then the secretary was obviously like, "No." And then Phaethon is obviously upset, and he begs and he's actually pulling a lot of attention to himself because he's kind of being loud and annoying and a child. And then Helios like sees the like commotion over the cameras overlooking, and he like instantly recognizes his child, because he could keep up with his child. And so Helios makes a call and informs the staff to let them come upstairs, to let Phaethon come upstairs. And Phaethon calms down a little bit, and he gets on the very large elevator and goes 200 floors up. So stepping on the elevator, Phaethon is greeted by a stunning office overlooking the whole city. And across the room, he sees his father, Helios, he's been waiting to meet his whole life. Helios warmly embraces him, and then they talk for hours. They talk about his mother, his childhood, and some of his interests that are just like video games and his friends, normal teenager stuff. Phaethon asked his father, like, why did you leave? Like, why weren't you my father? Where have you been? And then Helios lets him know that he had to keep his identity hidden because he had signed a contract that basically signed his life away. He had learned about Phaethon's birth a little bit after he began his company, and so the investors made him sign something that said he would not reach out because he needed to focus on his business and not his family. And this was obviously very upsetting to Phaethon because that shows that your father chose like a business over you. So obviously hurt, but he could understand the reasoning behind that, and then that made sense about why his mother couldn't talk about it. And then a little history about Heliotech. It was the most advanced company on Earth, and they specialized in electric vehicles that rely on like preserving natural resources. So Helios himself made the company what it was. He lacked the money to make it like well known. So he found some investors to get involved, and the company became so successful. And then shortly after this, Helios was informed that they were expecting a child, and this is where the investors created a contract. And Helios was obviously upset about the contract, but he understood that he had a bigger role in this life than just being a father, whereas he could help preserve the earth with these electric cars that, for example, rely on the earth's rays. And he just hoped that one day his son would forgive him and hopefully understand that as well. So after this, Helios is going to try to change the topic, and he offers a tour of the company. Phaethon accepts the offer, even though he's still like upset, of course, but he's in this very cool place that he just learned so much about on TikTok. So Phaethon is amazed by the technology during the tour. Like, they got everything, like cars, buildings, robots, amazing. The highlight of the tour is the unveiling of the newest invention. It's the flying car, and this is what he had seen on TikTok, so he was amazed, and he was so excited, and he saw everything about the car. He got to sit in it, he got to learn about how it worked and why it worked. And then this vehicle actually relied on the rays of the sun for power, and it, of course, took a very talented driver, like more than astronauts, because they had to calculate it precisely to make it work. But just seeing it was so amazing to him. Helios knows that Phaethon is upset with him, but Helios knows that he has all this like value. Like, he has money, he has business, he has like experiences he can offer to his son, and he's excited to have a relationship with him. So knowing that Phaethon is still upset with him, Helios offers him like one wish, that they can amend the relationship. And like, of course, he knows it's a journey, it's gonna get there, but this was just like a starting point. Like, what do you want? Do you want a house? Like, I'll get you whatever you want, and then we can work on a relationship from there. And then he continues his tour, and he's like, oh, do you want to grab dinner? Let's go back to the office. And then they're just chatting it up, catching up, moving on with their lives. And then they get back, and Phaethon knows what he wants, and Helios is like, oh, we can wait. Like, you don't have to know immediately. Like, you take your time. It's a big, And Phaethon's like, no, I want the flying car. I want to drive the flying car. And Helios is like, no, you can't do that. You are not educated enough, let alone you don't know how to do this. And it's like barely past the requirements to be able to drive. And Phaethon was like, you told me I could have whatever I want. Like, how are you going to leave me and lie to me at the same time? And then Helios was like, I did give you my word, but I just don't think you should do this. You really shouldn't do this. Like, you've never even driven a car. And Phaethon is like, well, I drive cars all the time in my video games. And Phaethon was like, you literally have never driven. But knowing that he has to honor his wishes, Helios lets him drive the car. Even though he's uneducated, he doesn't give him his blessing, but he still allows him to do it. So Phaethon gets in the little car, he starts it up, and he was so impressed because he was able to like levitate it off the roof a little bit, and then he got confident, and he was doing the calculations, all while trying to drive a car in the sky in New York City filled with skyscrapers, and he makes it off the building, gets super confident off the building, and then all of a sudden, like, the car like starts shaking, and it's like heating up. It is hot inside, and he like can stay kind of cool because he has like a cooling suit, but the ship is hot, like the car is hot, and the stuff around it is hot. And this is because like he obviously miscalculated, because all he has is a high school education, miscalculated the rays from the sun, so he was just overheating the car and the area around it, and this causes him to of course burn, but he's still like surviving because he's got that special suit. But the environment around the car starts to burn as well, so like buildings are melting, catching on fire, the trees, the cars. Obviously this is worrying. And then the people of New York City like begin to sweat, obviously, because it's super duper hot and their stuff is on fire, and they pray to Zeus. And Zeus is like, it's whatever, like, it's just a little warm, you'll be fine. And then as Phaethon got closer and closer to the ground, it got hotter, and the people began to like burn alive, and pass away, of course. So from there, Zeus granted their wishes, and he struck the car and Phaethon with a lightning bolt. This, of course, killed him, and this did kill other people too. And this was kind of traumatic because Helios was watching from his office as his son miscalculated and his death. And this ended the brutal drive, and it also killed a couple people. And then, of course, his mother and Helios were devastated, as no one wants to lose their child, let alone because of some misplaced confidence and you shouldn't have promised that. So what we can learn overall from this is that unchecked ambition, hubris, recklessness, yeah, that's a big one. And then, yeah. Oh, and I chose a modern retelling of an older story, because I kind of like little children's books, and this one made the most sense to me.